Mildred's husband had a tradition. Every Saturday he used to play poker with his friends. This had been going on for many years, and Mildred was used to the weekly ritual. Vance, a student friend of her husband's, had a summer house in the suburbs. He used to invite Justin and a few other old college friends. The gathering was exclusively male, and it never occurred to Mildred to ask her husband to come with him. "You're my precious Mildred," Justin always said, kissing his wife before leaving. "Today I probably won't come home. I want to relax with the guys, drink beer and eat pizza, and speak about male nonsense. You know, I can't drive drunk." "Yes, of course," Mildred nodded understandingly. "Stay at Vance's. I don't mind. Have a nice game and time." "And don't miss me, sweetheart," Justin added. "I've put some money on your card. Go have some fun. Go out with your friends. Buy yourself something nice or get a manicure or new hairstyle." With these words he left for the whole weekend. "That's how generous Justin is," Mildred always marvelled. "He always gives me extra money and insists I buy something for myself." However, Mildred had long since forgotten how to spend money on herself and didn't like shopping. Her whole life revolved around her family, her husband and her child. Her son was now grown up, living in another city and attending college. Mildred didn't understand the idea of buying something impractical yet beautiful. Spending a lot of money on a piece of clothing seemed wasteful to her. She wasn't interested in fashion, beauty salons, or plastic surgery. She preferred buying useful things for the house. Maybe a bread maker to pamper Justin with freshly baked bread at breakfast, or a new coffee machine. Justin loves good coffee. Or maybe a new couch for the living room. Their house was filled with all sorts of new appliances. The kitchen had a yogurt maker, an ice cream maker, a multi-cooker, an electric grill, and various mixers, shakers and toasters. Mildred didn't buy semi-finished or frozen foods. She made her own meatballs, dumplings, mayonnaise, cottage cheese and yogurt. She baked pies, cookies and cakes, and canned pickles and jams. For fresh produce and meat she went to the market. She never felt bad about spending money on these things, and did so with great pleasure. It was much more useful and enjoyable than buying an expensive set of underwear, like her friend Kimberly had boasted about a week ago. Kimberly was Mildred's only friend from childhood. In the past, Mildred had more friends, but after marriage and the birth of her child they drifted apart. Only Kimberly remained in touch, though less frequently than before. Kimberly was the opposite of Mildred. By the time they were 40, their differences were quite obvious. Kimberly was tall, slender, and a striking blonde with bright makeup and provocative clothes. Mildred, on the other hand, was short, plain, and brown-haired, with dimples on her cheeks and no makeup. The only beauty routine she had was applying moisturizers at night. Kimberly had been married and divorced twice, and now she enjoyed meeting men on dating sites or in nightclubs. Mildred, however, was a homemaker whose interests didn't go beyond her apartment. Each friend thought the other's life was a nightmare, but they still met out of habit and kept an eye on each other. Each sincerely believed she was doing better than the other. As soon as the door closed behind Justin, Mildred quickly finished her household chores and thought about what to do for the weekend. Food's cooked for 2 days. The fridge has Justin's favourite, cake soaking in cream. He'll be so happy when he comes back. The rooms are clean and tidy. All the linen is washed, ironed, and hung in the dressing room. Should I go to the movies or the theatre? She lazily surfed the internet on her phone, checking today's play schedule. Finding nothing of interest, Mildred sighed in disappointment. Or maybe, she thought, I'm just too lazy to leave the cosy apartment in this damp, unpleasant autumn weather. Justin is having a good time with his friend. Maybe I'll just watch a movie or TV series at home. She searched popular movie sites for trending shows. She picked a few, but turned them off within 5 minutes. Either she had outgrown them, or the audience was too dumb for her liking. Well, what about reading a book? Mildred hadn't read anything more serious than cake recipes in years. Justin had a nice library in his study, so Mildred headed there. Her eyes swept over the numerous bookshelves. What should I read? Maybe some classics. I haven't read classics since high school. After some thought, Mildred pulled a volume of O. Henry's short stories from the top shelf and sat down in her husband's chair. She used to like O. Henry very much, but now, after reading a couple of stories, she found herself thinking about other things. For example, she pondered whether to have tea and a sandwich. She had just sorted a nice piece of lard with garlic the day before. Her stomach rumbled treacherously. Resolutely slamming the book shut, Mildred got up from the armchair and saw a piece of paper fall out of the book. Bending over, she picked it up and initially wanted to put it back, but then she noticed it was a receipt from a jewellery store for a gold and diamond necklace, and for rather a large sum. Did Justin really want to surprise her? He hasn't given her any jewellery in ages. Reading more carefully, Mildred saw the date and was confused. The purchase was made almost 2 years ago. What is this? She stared at the paper, trying to make sense of it. Justin bought an expensive necklace 2 years ago. Unfortunately for Mildred, she never saw the gift. Obviously it went to someone else. But who? Despite the obvious answer, Mildred refused to call things by their proper names. Another woman. Come on, that's nonsense. Complete nonsense. Maybe he didn't buy it at all. Maybe it wasn't Justin's receipt at all. It's just some random stray paper that got into our library. Yet her fingers were trembling and her palms were sweaty. The very suspicion, the theoretical possibility of his betrayal, suddenly arose so clearly and vividly that she became frightened. Shoving the receipt back into the book with disgust, as if it were poisoning the very air around her, Mildred ran helplessly around the apartment, wringing her hands. She could, of course, call Justin immediately and ask him directly about the origin of the receipt. Of course, he would have some simple and logical explanation for it. But deep down, Mildred knew she was afraid. Afraid to hear a second hesitation in his voice. Afraid to realize that her Justin was lying. But her emotions still demanded an outlet. Mildred needed to consult someone. She suddenly remembered Kimberly. Perhaps her friend was not the most suitable candidate to pour out her soul and share her shameful suspicion, but Mildred had no one closer. Hearing the voice of an old friend on the phone, Kimberly was surprised. "Mildred? Oh, I haven't heard from you in a while," she said hoarsely. "Are you sick?" Mildred asked cautiously. "Why do you sound like that?" "I'm not sick, I was just sleeping. You woke me up. Good morning," Kimberly hummed. "Morning?" Mildred looked at her watch, confused. "It's noon." "Well, I went to bed a few hours ago," her friend replied nonchalantly, and yawned sweetly and long into the receiver. "It's been a stormy night, you know. Only at 8 a.m. in the morning did I manage to send my beau away and finally take a nap." Mildred involuntarily blushed, though she had long been accustomed to such revelations from her friend. "Well, dear, why are you calling?" Kimberly suddenly asked seriously. "What happened?" "Why, nothing happened," Mildred cheerfully lied. "I just missed you. We really haven't seen each other in forever. I just wanted to meet you, see how you were doing." "You're not telling the truth, Mildred," said Kimberly shrewdly, but she didn't refuse to meet. "Okay, let me think. When and where shall we meet? In the centre? What restaurant?" "Oh, no, I don't want to go to a restaurant," Mildred said. "We don't know what kind of food they cook there, whether they wash their hands. Maybe they have cockroaches in the kitchen running around on their plates." "I recognise an old friend," laughed Kimberly. "Oh, that pathological squeamishness of yours. Well, then what do you suggest? I'm hungry." "Come to my place," Mildred suggested. "I've got food, lots of it." "Good," said Kimberly. "I'll bring the wine." At first, Mildred wanted to refuse, but then after thinking about it, she didn't. A little drink and relaxation would do her good right now. "Is your hubby at home?" Kimberly asked warily. She frankly disliked Justin, and it was mutual. Mildred did not understand the reason for this mutual dislike, but both of them had never told her about it, no matter how much she asked. There's no Justin here, and he won't be until tomorrow, Mildred reported. Good. Then wait, I'll be there soon. Kimberly arrived an hour and a half later, laden with bags, bearing the logo of a well-known liquor store. In the bag, bottles clinked. Why so much? Mildred was involuntarily horrified, but Kimberly only waved it away nonchalantly. Come on, we have to celebrate the meeting. I missed you terribly. Shall we sit in the kitchen, in a simple way? Mildred suggested to her friend. Frankly speaking, I don't want to bother setting the table in the living room. I'm tired of these ceremonies. Sure, let's go to the kitchen. Kimberly nodded vigorously. I don't care about these formalities at all. I'm just hungry. What have you got? Salad, soup, stew. But with the wine, it might not be much, said Mildred doubtfully. Cool. I haven't had homemade meal in ages. They drank a glass of wine, ate salad and stared at each other, realizing they needed to talk. Kimberly chewed in silence, waiting for Mildred to start the important conversation. What do you think? Mildred began cautiously, embarrassed and stammering. Not seriously, not really, but purely theoretically. Could Justin cheat on me? She expected her friend to be indignant, to protest and assure her. Oh, no! How could you think that? A woman like you can't be cheated on. You're a dream. Justin loves you so much. But instead, Kimberly nodded gravely. Of course. What's more, I'm sure he's cheating on you. What? Mildred gasped with indignation. How dare you? Don't get mad, her friend said calmly. I'm not saying this to offend or hurt you. I'm just stating a fact. You asked. I gave you an honest answer. Fact? How could you possibly know that? Mildred babbled, stunned. I just know this type of man very well, Kimberly said, looking at Mildred with undisguised sympathy. He can't help but chase after some new skirt. My Justin is not like that, gasped Mildred. Oh, of course he is, Kimberly responded snidely. You know something. Speak up, Mildred demanded, her suspicion growing. Kimberly looked away guiltily. Tell me now, Mildred insisted, or I'll knock you out. She waved the half-empty wine bottle threateningly. Kimberly rolled her eyes. No more wine for Mildred. You've had enough. And yet, Mildred persisted, what do you know about Justin that I don't? Her friend took a deep breath. He's been hitting on me since your wedding. What? Mildred was stunned. You heard me. Okay. Then how did this happen? She whispered. I went to the bathroom and he followed me, pressed me against the wall and tried to kiss me. He said I was incredibly sexy and that I made him crazy. Mildred gasped again. You're lying, she said, already realizing deep down that her friend was telling the truth. Kimberly shrugged. I knew you wouldn't believe me. That's why I kept it quiet all these years. I didn't want to fight. And what did you do then? At our wedding? Mildred asked, realizing that if Kimberly said she had responded to his advances, Mildred would die on the spot. What did I do? I kneed him between the legs and threatened that if he tried it again, I'd scratch his eyes out and tell you everything. Now Mildred understood the true reason for the mutual dislike between her husband and best friend. She wrapped her arms around her head and groaned. Did he really start cheating on me back then, when we had just gotten married? I just can't believe it. Looking at her friend with compassion, Kimberly handed her a paper napkin and a filled glass of wine. Have a drink, it'll make you feel better. Mildred took a sip, her hands shaking and her teeth tapping against the glass. So you finally suspect that your precious Justin has someone else. Sorry to what I am going to say, but you know, if this had happened 20 years ago when you just got married, I would have definitely called him a scoundrel, a jerk. But now, Now that you've found out about his affairs, I'd like to say only one thing. It's no wonder he's cheating on you. It's your own fault." For a moment, Mildred was speechless. "I'm to blame for his cheating? What are you talking about?" "Please don't take offence. Who else is going to tell you the harsh truth but me?" "What's the truth? Don't drag it out," Mildred pleaded. Kimberly took a deep breath. "Darling, have you seen yourself in the mirror lately?" "What do you mean?" Mildred was confused. "Well, your husband is a hunter by nature. He goes after everything bright, spectacular, and unattainable. And you've turned into a real simpleton." These words felt like slaps, and Mildred could feel red spots appearing on her cheeks. "Really, you've stopped looking after yourself. Don't you notice it? Your main trump cards used to be youth and lightness. You were beautiful, slim, with a nice figure. And now? Do you do any sports? You don't have to go to the gym, but at least do some exercises at home. Some stretching, squats, presses. Or go to the pool. What's wrong with that?" Mildred lowered her gaze bashfully. Gym? She hated sports with every fibre of her being. But the pool? She loved swimming, of course. But recently she had gotten very overweight and was embarrassed to appear in public in a swimsuit. She and Justin hadn't even been to the sea for many years. Not because they couldn't afford it, but because she didn't want to show her body on the beach. And anyway, why do stretching or squats when you can cosy up on the couch, pour yourself a cup of tea, and eat a delicious muffin or cake, which she baked with such love and care? All your interests are fixated solely on the house, husband and son. You've even stopped getting your nails done. Kimberly shook her head disapprovingly, looking at Mildred's unkempt hands. "I'm running around the house," Mildred mumbled confusedly and guiltily. "Long nails get in the way." "Well, why do they have to be long? The main thing is that they look beautiful." Kimberly shook her head reproachfully. "Go to the mirror and look at yourself with a fresh, impartial look. Is there anything there to catch your eye?" Mildred blushed. "You don't put on makeup," Kimberly continued. "You don't pluck your eyebrows. Your hair, too, is in some old-fashioned bun. You have such beautiful hair." "It's in the way," Mildred mumbled again, but Kimberly interrupted her angrily. "In the way of working like a damned woman? You're not a human being. You're just some robot housewife." "Justin likes it cosy and warm and smelling like delicious food at home." Mildred made one last attempt. Kimberly looked at her pitifully. "Your Justin likes it when there's a beautiful, attractive and sexy woman next to him, not an overweight lady smelling of soup and cutlets, whose main interests are running to the market for meat and making dumplings," she said mercilessly. Mildred couldn't help herself and cried. "What am I to do?" she sobbed. "I can never be as you say, bold, beautiful, defiant and sexy." "Oh, come on." Kimberly came to her senses and hugged her friend, comforting her. "It's not such an unfathomable science. You can do anything if you'd like to. I'll give you the phone number of my beautician, stylist, manicurist, and plastic surgeon." Mildred's shock even stopped her crying, and gave a loud hiccup. A plastic surgeon? Why?" Kimberly waved her hands. "Time is passing, and unfortunately, we are not getting any younger. Young, slender girls are stepping on our heels. We have to keep ourselves toned." "You too?" Mildred asked incredulously, giving her friend a finicky look. Kimberly laughed mirthlessly. "What did you think, dear? Actually, you and I are both in our 40s. "Yeah, but you're always beautiful," Mildred mumbled in shock, looking at her friend. Her firm, tanned skin, the precise line of her cheekbone, chin, slim waist and long legs. "It's not natural. Naive you are." Kimberly even laughed at her naivety. "All this is the achievement of modern plastic surgery and cosmetology. Anyway, here you go." She rummaged in her purse and handed Mildred a business card. These are the contacts of my plastic surgeon. By the way, he's a great guy. He and I once had a stormy romance." She grinned meaningfully. Mildred obediently put the card in her purse, but deep down she was sure that she would never call the number. It's one thing to go to the hairdresser or stylist, make beautiful nails, makeup, but lie down under the surgeon's knife? No way! No man in the world is worth such sacrifices. The next morning, Justin sent a message informing his wife that he would be staying at his friend's country house until evening. Mildred did not object, briefly answering, "All right." Frankly speaking, she was even glad he had written instead of calling. She was absolutely not ready to hear his voice now. Mildred was afraid she would give herself away, start expressing her claims and suspicions, which was not in her plans so far. The fact that Justin decided to stay longer at his friend's was even to her advantage. She couldn't get yesterday's conversation with Kimberly out of her head, and Mildred was determined to change her own life and change herself. Really, it's time to remember that I am a woman and take care of myself. She decided to start small. She called the beauty salon recommended by her friend and was pleased to learn that she was lucky. One of the masters just had a window between clients. "Come by 12 o'clock, she was told. "Just please don't be late." Mildred entered the salon with mixed feelings of embarrassment, delight and fear. Looking at her reflection in the huge, almost full-wall mirror, she realized for the first time how right Kimberly was. Now, looking at herself in bright daylight in all her glory, or rather unadorned, she felt like an imposter, an ugly woman who unceremoniously invaded someone else's realm of femininity and beauty. It seemed to her that everyone was about to start laughing loudly and pointing fingers at her. Look at that woman! Does she really believe she can make a difference? Mildred paused in indecision, mentally prepared to flee, but fortunately at that moment one of the hairdressers noticed her. "It was you who called this morning, wasn't it?" She smiled welcomingly. Mildred nodded bashfully. "Come in." She waved her hand, pointing in the direction. And in a few moments Mildred found herself in the chair. In one swift movement, the hairdresser undid her hair and whistled delightedly. Her hair was indeed Mildred's pride, or rather it had been once. Now she always put it up in a bundle or a braid, not letting that silky brown wealth spill freely over her back and shoulders. "What are you going to do?" the girl inquired of her. "Shall we trim the tips, freshen up the colour, style it, perm it?" Mildred squeezed her eyes shut, as if she was going to jump into the river from a steep cliff, and blurted out before she could change her mind. "Cut, as short as possible. I want a bob and blonde hair." Drastically. The hairdresser clucked his tongue. "And don't you feel sorry for your hair?" Of course, Mildred felt sorry for her hair, but it wasn't just a haircut for her. It was a symbol of her renewal. It was critical for her to do something radical with herself, something completely unlike her before. "I'm tired of it," she confided to the girl. "It makes my head ache, takes a long time to wash, and is a real nuisance at home." "I see," the master nodded agreeably. "Well, a bob is a bob. I think it will suit you. You've got the right face shape, and the new haircut will emphasize it." Hearing these words, Mildred even puffed up a little and cheered up. It's not all bad, it turns out. She has the right oval face. Who'd have thought? "I wouldn't recommend pure blonde," the master said softly. "I suggest doing complex colouring. For example, balayage or ombre. Do as you see fit." Mildred waved her hand. "I trust you completely." "Only it'll take a long time," the girl warned. "That's okay, I'm in no hurry," Mildred retorted, mentally glad that Justin wouldn't be back until the evening. Now she would have enough time for herself. Of course, it wasn't as easy to say as it was to do. When Mildred saw her heavy braid fall to the floor, she covered her eyes for a moment, fighting the tears that suddenly came. She remembered how much Justin loved her hair, how he had always unbraided it before going to bed. running the smooth, silky strands between his fingers. Had he ever really loved her? Now Mildred doubted it. However, she clearly remembered the moment when Justin had pushed her femininity to the margins. It happened shortly after the birth of their son Arthur. Mildred had been thrilled at that time with the way Justin had rejoiced at the arrival of their son, literally to the point of tears. When Mildred and the baby were discharged from the hospital, he met them with balloons and a huge bouquet of red roses. "Thank you for our son, darling," he whispered to his wife, kissing her. Mildred awkwardly smiled. She had gained a lot of weight during pregnancy. Even after giving birth, the situation didn't improve much, and Mildred felt too clumsy. "I'll go on a diet," she timidly told her husband, with an adoring look in her favourite eyes. "I'll get back into my old shape rapidly. You'll see." And then suddenly her husband's face became alien and distant. "Don't you dare," he hissed almost hostilely. "Don't you dare even think about it. No diets and other nonsense. You must eat well and regularly, because you belong not only to yourself but to our son as well. You are first and foremost a nursing mother. Got it?" Mildred nodded guiltily. And really, why is she fixated on her figure? If she wants to, she'll lose weight at any moment. But for now, she really needs to think about breastfeeding. Arthur, she breastfed until he was a year old. But as it turned out later, losing weight was not as easy and simple as she imagined. Certainly not at one point. Mildred exhausted herself with rigid diets, dropped a couple of pounds, then broke down, ate at night, after which the weight returned again, and even with addictions. At first she was tormented by remorse for such behaviour, and then she stopped. Mildred said to herself, "Well, it does not work to lose weight, and okay, I am good as I am. Justin does not express, so it's all right." However, Justin showed less and less interest in Mildred. He assured her that her figure had nothing to do with it. He was just tired at work. Mildred believed it. What else could she do? 3 hours flew by unnoticed behind these unhappy and reflective thoughts. "Well," said the hairdresser, pulling the sheet from the client's neck. "Done." Mildred looked at herself in the mirror and did not recognize herself. The bob refreshed her face. It made her more delicate and feminine, even younger. She couldn't take her eyes off herself. "Oh, how it suits you!" other hairdressers and clients exclaimed, looking at the transformed Mildred. Inspired by sincere compliments, Mildred thanked the master and left her a generous tip. Then, inspired, she rushed to the first shopping centre to buy herself new clothes. It was necessary to complete the image of a beautiful and self-confident woman. But there her fervour waned a little. Mildred wandered confusedly between hangers with clothes and mannequins, timidly taking off the things she liked and putting them on. Then, suddenly, some young girl, a consultant and extended eyelashes and nails of 3 centimetres, cast a mocking glance over Mildred's figure and not too politely said, "There's nothing in for your size." She deliberately emphasised the word your with a squeamish intonation. "Nothing. You'd better go to another store." The blood rushed to Mildred's cheeks. Burning with shame, she awkwardly mumbled some apologies under her breath and hurried out of there. How embarrassed she felt. All her confidence and delight in her new hairstyle was instantly forgotten. "No," Mildred said to herself, "I will not let some rude girl who wasn't taught to communicate with customers spoil my mood." To console herself, she decided to go to the food court. Although Mildred was still squeamish about catering food, she decided to get at least a glass of coffee. Settling down at a vacant table, she sipped lazily through a straw and tried to calm down. Suddenly, her gaze, wandering aimlessly around the food court, lingered on one paddling and noisy family. It was a husband and wife and 2 restless children. Looking closer, Mildred was amazed to recognise Vance in the man. Yes, the same Vance to whose summer house Justin had gone yesterday. So, they have already returned to the city? It's strange that Justin didn't call me. Feeling some kind of confusion and anxiety, Mildred stood up and walked over to their table. "Hello, Vance," she greeted her husband's friend. "Mildred, what a surprise to see you here. How are you? How's Justin?" The woman blinked confusedly. "But why do you ask how Justin is? You just broke up with him, didn't you?" Now Vance stared at her in genuine amazement and echoed, "What do you mean?" "Well, he's been with you since yesterday, hasn't he? He's been in your summer house playing poker game, just like a week ago. He goes to you every weekend." Mildred began uncertainly, already subconsciously regretting starting this conversation and feeling like a complete fool. Vance's wife rounded her eyes in amazement. "To the summer house? What are you talking about? Vance?" She turned to her husband, then to Mildred and explained, "You see, our house has been under renovation for 6 months. We can't get it finished." "Oh yes, the summer house." Vance tapped himself on the forehead, pretending to just remember. "Of course, that's how we go with him. We went to a neighbour, Tom. He lives across the fence from us and always invites us over." "What Tom?" His wife frowned. Vance stealthily stepped on her foot under the table, ordering her to shut up. But Mildred still noticed this elusive movement. Vance's wife changed her face and smiled forcefully. "Ah, yes, Tom. Yes, sometimes you and your friends go to see him." But Mildred wasn't fooled. She had already realized that Justin had lied to her about Vance's bathhouse, and now he was just clumsily trying to protect his friend, and his wife was playing along. How stupid, silly, and disgusting. "All right," she said dryly. "Since Justin is already back, I'll go home too." As she left the food court, Mildred couldn't help but look back. Vance had taken out his cell phone and putting the receiver to his ear was trying to call someone. Mildred even grinned, knowing he was calling her husband to warn him. She came home with a heavy heart. As soon as she opened the door, she felt Justin was home too. He came quickly. He must have been in town with his mistress, and when Vance called, he rushed home. "Mildred!" Justin falsely rejoiced, clutching her in his arms. "I missed you so much." Mildred set her bag on the poof and began to remove her shoes leisurely. She didn't respond to the hug, choked with anger and resentment, and she couldn't explain her suspicions directly either. They had lived together for so many years, and if she had said those terrible words now, there would be no going back. Their lives would change forever, and she was afraid to take that decisive step. "How was the game?" she asked in a sultry tone, though a hurricane of emotions raged inside her. "All right," said Justin quickly. "I thought I'd win. I had a full house, but that damn Tom, Vance's neighbour, ruined everything. He had a straight flush." "It's a pity," Mildred said. "I met Vance at the mall. He told me." "Oh, really?" Justin was naively surprised, as if hearing about it for the first time. "Wow, what a coincidence. So he's already in town? He got a flat tire on the road, so I just got here." "I see," Mildred nodded. The calmness of her voice deceived Justin. He thought the danger was over, and his wife suspected nothing. "How are you here without me, Mildred?" he said. "Did you miss me? What have you been doing?" "Well, what could I have been doing?" Mildred replied evasively. "I've been doing chores." Justin didn't say anything about her new hairstyle or hair colour. He didn't seem to notice the changes in Mildred. She had become so ordinary and familiar to him that he stopped looking at her. Mildred decided not to say anything either. "Do we have anything to eat, Mildred?" asked Justin sweetly, having completely calmed down. I'm terribly hungry. I've missed your food. No one else in the world cooks as deliciously as you do." Then everything spun, twirled, and went as usual. Mildred heated up Justin's dinner, fed him, habitually giving him the tastiest pieces, and he ate with great pleasure, praising her culinary talent. Perhaps that was the only thing Justin still admired in her, her ability to cook deliciously and in various ways. For a moment, it even seemed to Mildred that nothing had happened. Peace and love reigned in their family, just as it had 2 days ago, and nothing could shake her confidence. Or maybe she had made it all up, hadn't she? But Mildred immediately shook her head resolutely, refusing to give in to her own weakness, even cowardice. "There's nothing to hide your head in the sand like an ostrich. We must face the truth, and not make ridiculous excuses for her husband." She remembered the cheque from the jewellery store, and the fact that for many months he had lied to her about going to a friend's summer house on weekends. No, to close your eyes and pretend that nothing happened is just not respecting yourself. However, she wasn't going to act rashly. First, she needed to think of specific ways to retreat, and then demand a divorce. There was, of course, another option, not to divorce, but to try again to win her husband's love and return his feelings. Let him realize what a beautiful woman lives next to him. Not a cook, not a housewife, not the mother of his child, but a woman. It was almost impossible, Mildred realized. He hadn't even noticed her new stunning hairdo. Although, of course, it's not enough to change her hair. She still had weight issues, saggy skin, self-care issues. Maybe try to become a femme fatale to make Justin completely lose his head over her. Taking out a business card with the contacts of a plastic surgeon given to her by Kimberly, Mildred thoughtfully turned it in her hands. And maybe really risk it? In the evening, for the sake of experiment, Mildred went to the bathroom, where she lay for a long time in fragrant soapy water with a mask on her face. Then she diligently scrubbed her whole body with honey scrub, making her skin smooth, fragrant and golden, and then applied a moisturizing Korean cream. Mildred put on a delicate silk negligee, which successfully masked all her body's imperfections and emphasized her advantages. She remembered that she had bought this negligee accidentally at a sale in an online store, but never wore it. Now, looking at herself in the fogged mirror, she thought with annoyance, "And why did you wait, fool?" All beautiful and fragrant, Mildred went to the marital bedroom. Justin was already lying on his side of the bed, reading an e-book on his tablet. He had his glasses on his nose and looked focused and engrossed. Mildred snuggled under the covers and, overcoming a shiver of excitement, cuddled up to her husband. He mumbled questioningly. That probably meant, "What do you want?" Instead of answering, Mildred slid her palm across his chest, down to his belly. But Justin intercepted her hand and said, "Listen, Mildred, I'm dying to sleep. I have to get up early for work tomorrow." Mildred kept silent, trying to hide her disappointment. Well, of course, he doesn't have time for his wife, if he had a marathon of bed escapades with his mistress this weekend. Taking her silence as agreement, Justin yawned, put the tablet down on the nightstand and turned off the light. "Good night, darling," he said in the dark. Mildred lay on her side of the bed, silently swallowing her tears. He did not notice the beautiful negligee, or that she was so clean and fragrant for him. No, returning Justin's attention will be very hard. I'll have to involve heavy artillery, plastic surgery. "Justin," she called hesitantly in a whisper. "Justin, I have a new hairdo, by the way. Everyone says it suits me very well, but you didn't even pay attention. Once my hair was the object of your adoration. Do you really not care about me now?" Tears flowed from her eyes, no longer restrained. Justin was silent. Mildred thought he was simply ashamed. Then, clasping her eyes shut, she decided to go all the way. "I know that you've lost interest in me as a woman, and I know all about your infatuation with others. And I know about that damned diamond necklace too," she exhaled faintly. Justin muttered something softly in response. "What?" Mildred didn't understand. "What did you say?" Justin remained silent. She moved closer to him and leaned into his face to hear him repeat what he had said. Instead, Justin snorted loudly and rolled over onto his other side. He was already sound asleep. Mildred did not like the plastic surgeon at first sight. He was a man about her age with a smart and bile face. His small, inquisitive eyes scrutinized her through glasses with massive fashionable frames, making Mildred feel naked. He also had a prominent nose, almost enormous. It made the surgeon look like an angry bird of prey. Mildred fleetingly thought that if she were in his shoes, the first thing she would do would be to redo her nose. A cobbler with no shoes. In a bored voice, the doctor listed her upcoming work, and Mildred realized how absurd the idea was with every second. "We have a lot of work to do, Mrs. Barnett," the surgeon said, curving his thin lips. "First, we need a lift." "A lift of what?" Mildred asked apprehensively. "Pretty much everything." His lips curved contemptuously again, as if he was struggling to overcome his disgust at treating such an imperfect client. He was supposed to be pleased, though. After all, the more problems with her appearance, the more money the clinic would get for the surgeries. First eyelid lift, second facelift, third tummy tuck, then rhinoplasty. Mildred instinctively pushed back her chair, fighting the urge to cover her nose with her hand, as if afraid the surgeon would come at her with a scalpel right then and there. "What's wrong with my nose?" she asked cautiously. "It's not very graceful. I would suggest tweaking the tip a bit," the surgeon explained. "Look at your beak," Mildred thought angrily, but said nothing. "Then we need to correct the floating line of the chin," the surgeon continued. "Do liposuction, correct the breast area, and then—" "So it's all absolutely necessary?" Mildred cautiously clarified, realizing how many flaws she apparently had. "Can't we do with a truncated set of services? Anything unnecessary in that scope of work?" The surgeon looked at her as if she were a cat that had just pooped on his desk. "Unnecessary? Are you kidding me, Mrs. Barnett? You've driven your body and face into a real disaster." He turned his computer monitor toward Mildred and began to demonstrate what he planned to do to her appearance. Mildred watched, mesmerized by the three-dimensional image of her own face. She saw it transform, becoming young, bold, beautiful, but alien. Looking longingly at the perfect, photoshopped picture, Mildred realized that if she really went through with this, the result would not be her, not Mildred, Mrs. Barnett. "So," the surgeon said in a bored voice, "when are you ready to come to our clinic?" Mildred swallowed nervously. "And when should I?" "Well, the sooner the better. You understand we have many clients, the queue is long. I'm only doing this because Kimberly asked me to. So," he flipped through her diary, "come to us on Wednesday. Let's not put things off." Mildred was scared to death. "This Wednesday? Already this Wednesday?" she exclaimed. "Why delay?" the doctor marvelled. I can't go that fast," Mildred muttered, feeling her voice shake. "I have to think about it, get used to the idea, mentally prepare myself." The surgeon rolled his eyes, making it clear he was tired of this unyielding client. At that moment, the office door opened, and a flamboyant woman flew in. Her long blonde hair was strewn over her shoulders, and hellfire burned in her eyes. "Mr. Dunn, save me!" she shouted in a terrible voice. Mildred was afraid that there had been some kind of terrible accident. The surgeon, however, did not panic. Instead, he broke out into a hilarious smile. Wow, Mildred hadn't realized he could smile like that. She had thought he could only pour scorn on patients and look at them as if they were bugs. My darling, he exclaimed in a sweet voice. What brings you here? It's been a long time since I've seen you. True, I'm a little busy now. He glanced expressively at Mildred. Maybe you'll wait 5 minutes until I'm done? The visitor, however, was not going to wait even 5 seconds. I've got a new wrinkle, she exclaimed in a tragic tone and jabbed her finger at her face. Her fingernails were painted a bright scarlet colour, and Mildred was even afraid she might poke herself in the eye. A terrible wrinkle. Dr. Dunn, it's a disaster. I urgently need a shot of Botox. Right now, I can feel myself getting older. Help! Mildred, no matter how much she gazed at this lady's smooth face, didn't notice a single wrinkle. However, it was quite obvious this was one of the regulars of the clinic. On her face and body, it seemed there was not a single spot untouched by the plastic surgeon's knife. Abnormally full lips, a precise nose, almost like Michael Jackson's in his later years, cheekbones sharp enough to cut, and a sharp chin. No brow, no drooping eyelids, no sagging face. She looked like a Barbie doll. Dr. Dunn, or one of his colleagues, had obviously worked on her figure too. An unrealistically thin waist, long skinny legs, and prominent breasts that looked like a pair of watermelons. Do men really find that beautiful? Mildred was suddenly horrified. Does it mean I'll have to become like that too? Mildred jumped up sharply, nearly knocking over her chair. Excuse me, she exclaimed, turning to the surprised surgeon. I have to run. I just remembered I've got the iron at home unplugged, and the washing machine, and the soup boiling on the stove. Barbie stared at her, and Mildred wasn't sure this person knew what ironing, washing, and cooking were. I'll call you another day, Mildred shouted, picking up her purse. Unless, of course, I change my mind. Thank you. Be well. Have a lovely day. Goodbye. She sprang out of the door, as if she feared Dr. Dunn would chase after her and send her to the operating room by force. She actually ran a couple of blocks after sprinting out of the clinic. Finally she slowed down, trying to catch her breath. She hadn't run like that in a long time. Mildred suddenly felt funny. She looked at the scene as if from outside, a 40-year-old woman running away from the doctor, like a first grader afraid of getting a shot. She stopped in the middle of the street and started laughing uncontrollably, at the top of her lungs. It must have been a special kind of hysteria. Passers-by looked warily at the strange woman, who laughed and cried, standing on the sidewalk and paying no attention to the people around her. I can't, Mildred mumbled, continuing to laugh and sob at the same time. No, I can't. It's not my thing. I'm not a Barbie doll, and I never was. I'm a teddy bear, and I'm comfortable being a teddy bear, not a doll. Yes, she decided, plastic surgery was definitely not for her. But then it meant that she would hardly be able to regain Justin's love. She covered her face with her palms and cried for real, without laughing. Is there nothing else that can't be undone? Miss, are you okay? She suddenly heard a concerned male voice beside her. Has someone hurt you? Do you need help? God, it had been a long time since a man offered her help, and this one called her a miss. It's just that he didn't get a good look at her. It's nice, of course, but now she's going to take her hands off her face, and the unknown helper will run away from her in fear, shining his heels. Without taking her palm from her face, Mildred silently shook her head, signalling that she didn't need help and was perfectly fine. Are you sure? The stranger asked with pressure. His voice was, by the way, very pleasant, low, slightly husky, deep. I wonder what he looks like. Mildred imagined a movie-handsome man with a white-toothed smile, strong-willed chin, piercing blue eyes and manly posture. It was even scary to open her eyes and look at him. What if there was some bald, toothless and tattooed man there? "I'm sure," she squeezed out through the force. "There's no need to worry. I'm perfectly all right." She strode away without even looking back. He seemed to be shouting something after her, maybe even asking her what her name was, or asking for her phone number, or maybe the opposite. That she was stupid and hysterical. Mildred didn't listen much. Her feet carried her away farther and farther from this place. She decided to walk home. She needed time to think seriously about the situation. To stay under the same roof with Justin, pretending as if nothing had happened, and she knew nothing. No, I can't. I need to go away for a while. It suddenly dawned on her, and Mildred wondered why this brilliant idea had not occurred to her before. Go somewhere where I can be completely alone and sort myself out. It was done. That same evening, Mildred informed her husband, who was extremely surprised, that she was completely exhausted by the housework. She needed a good rest, and therefore she had already bought a ticket to the sea. During the first days of her sudden vacation, Mildred did nothing but sleep. Perhaps her body reacted to the stress in such a peculiar and a little late way. She constantly wanted to sleep and fall asleep so soon as her head touched the pillow. Or maybe it was the fresh sea air that was coming into the room through the open window. Or maybe it was just that she was finally able to truly relax at last. She no longer had to think about what to prepare for breakfast, lunch and dinner for her beloved Justin. It was not necessary to care about cleaning the apartment, about the timely start of the dishwasher, washing machine, ironing. She did not have to stress about anything. She was not responsible for anyone, and she was free as a bird. Mildred purposely rented not a hotel room but an apartment. She did not trust catering establishments and preferred to eat food cooked with her own hands, so the kitchen came in very handy. However, it turned out that cooking for herself alone was not so interesting. Frankly speaking, Mildred had no appetite at all. For the first few days she ate only sunny peaches and drank water. And that was enough for her. She didn't tell her husband exactly where she was going. Justin, of course, knew that his wife had left for the sea, but had no idea in which direction. "I need to be alone," she told him, "in peace and quiet. Honestly, I really need complete, absolute solitude." Fortunately, Justin did not object. Frankly speaking, he was overjoyed to learn that his wife was going to leave and give him complete freedom of action for a while. The only thing that dampened his joy was that Mildred hadn't given him an exact date for her return. "I haven't taken a return ticket yet," she said. "I don't know myself when I'll be back. When I feel fully recovered and rested, then I'll come." That was why she didn't keep count of the days she found herself blissfully alone. Just slowly came to her senses. No thoughts, no remorse, no regrets. A few days later, she made her first attempt to go to the sea. She leisurely wandered to the nearest beach at sunset and stopped on the shore, watching the huge purple sun slowly sinking to the horizon line. Naturally, Mildred didn't go into the sea. She wasn't ready yet. But she just stood at the water's edge for a long time and looked into the distance. A fresh evening breeze was blowing from the sea, and the air was cut through by the deafening cries of seagulls. Mildred shivered from the cold, wrapped her arms around herself, and for the first time in days felt hungry. No, not just hungry, but starving. "I should go to the store, at least to buy some milk and bread," she thought, feeling her stomach twisting literally into a ram's horn and singing, lifting music. "And tomorrow morning I'll go to the local market, buy fresh vegetables, fruit, fish, cheese, and cook something for myself." She was about to rush to the nearest store when suddenly a soft male voice sounded behind her shoulder. "Do you like to watch sunsets on the shore?" Mildred mentally aghast. Perhaps she was just imagining it, but it was the same voice, the voice of the man who had asked her a few days ago if she needed help. Although she was probably just having auditory hallucination from hunger, it's most likely an entirely different person. If you are concerned about my unceremonious invasion of your personal space, just say so, the man added good-natured. Without waiting for her reply, I will leave immediately, so as not to inconvenience you. It just seemed to me that you needed an interlocutor right now. Mildred was stunned to hear his voice. Low, slightly husky, deep, very pleasant. It was him, after all. She could not mistake it. Those soft, exciting intonations, the recognizable lowering of tone at the end of a phrase. Too special, too individual a speech for that voice to belong to anyone else. Are you from the capital? She asked bluntly, deciding to set the record straight. From there, yes. The interlocutor was surprised. Why, is it so obvious? How did you determine that? Accent? He asked. Mildred smiled involuntarily. No, you didn't have an accent, but your voice. Your voice, it's very recognizable. Wait a minute. The man suddenly became agitated as well. Aren't you the lovely woman who cried inconsolably while standing in the middle of the sidewalk a week ago? Mildred's heart sank. He remembered her too. So it really was the same man. Such wonderful coincidences can happen. You're only wrong about one thing. She stretched out mockingly. I'm not a nice girl at all. You see, yes, that was me. Gathering her courage, Mildred finally turned to face him for the first time. Frankly speaking, she was ready for anything. For him to be ugly or, conversely, slavishly handsome like a doll Ken. But the reality exceeded all her expectations. The man was good, excellent, but not the glamorous beauty of models. He had a purely masculine, even harsh beauty. With such an appearance, he could work as a fireman, a gym trainer, or even a lumberjack. He looked about 45 years old, with a broad shoulder span. His small blonde hair and moustache were very neatly trimmed in some expensive salon. A pleasant smile and very kind grey eyes. Those eyes seemed to look right into her soul. And in my opinion, I was absolutely right, smiled the man. Last time, you never gave me the opportunity to look at you more closely, but now, finally, I can say with all responsibility, you really are a very sweet and incredibly beautiful woman. Mildred's cheeks flushed with a traitorous blush. God, even if he's lying, it's so nice to hear it. She hadn't been complimented by a man in ages. Justin mostly praised her cooking, and the nasty plastic surgeon Dr. Dunn stomped on her self-esteem, saying that there was nothing beautiful or even pretty about her, so he would have to redo everything. You are amusingly hovering over my every sentence. The man laughed. Don't worry, I won't give you a D for a wrong answer. Mildred relaxed a little and smiled too. I'm sorry, she said. I'm probably just not used to dealing with men. The interlocutor's bushy eyebrows flew upwards. So where have you spent the last few years? In a convent? Worse. Mildred shook her head. Married. The news that she was married visibly upset the man. Well, he complained, why are all the most beautiful women always married? Why am I so unlucky? Are you not married? Mildred was surprised. Alas, no. Then there's something wrong with you, she chided him. He shook his head gravely. No, it's just that I've been unlucky to meet the one and only, that's all. Speaking of which, why don't we get to know each other already? Since we're talking anyway, my name is Rob. Oh, may I call you Robbie? Mildred asked playfully, realizing she was flirting. In the most blatant way, flirting with a man she was seeing for almost the first time in her life. You better not, Rob shook his head. That's what my grandmother used to call me, and when I hear this form of my name I immediately remember the milk soup that she used to feed me, which I still hate. Mildred couldn't help but laugh out loud. "By the way," she said instructively, "milk soup can be made so delicious that you can be dragged by the ears. You just need to add, in addition to sugar, a little more salt, coconut shavings, cream and raisins." Rob looked at Mildred even more interested. "Maybe at least you'll tell me your name," he suggested. "I've already introduced myself." "Oh, yes, of course," Mildred interrupted. "I'm sorry. My name is Mildred." "I suggest we seal our acquaintance with a joint dinner at a restaurant," Rob proposed. Mildred was embarrassed. "What's wrong?" he asked understandingly. "Am I too assertive? Don't think badly, Mildred. I'm not going to hit on you. A married woman is sacred to me. It's really just going to be dinner." "That's not the point," she said quietly. "You see, I have this oddity. You might say my own personal obsession. I can't eat in restaurants, cafes or canteens. In short, in public places," she blurted out. Rob whistled in amazement. "Wow, even like that? Well, that's a pity. Alas, I'm not from here. I came for a vacation, and so, honestly, I would invite you to visit and feed you something prepared by my own hand. I'm not from around here either, but I'm renting an apartment with a kitchen. Would you like me to cook something for you and invite you to visit? There is also a very cosy terrace where I usually have breakfast, lunch and dinner." Before she finished her sentence, Mildred was horrified. What's he talking about? She's literally imposing on a man she barely knows. But Rob smiled gently. "So, I invited you, and you're going to feed me. It's unfair." Mildred became despondent, thinking that this was the final refusal. But Rob continued, slyly looking at her. "Although there is another option. I buy all the necessary products for dinner. You write me a list, and you, Mildred, will cook and feed me." She felt her lips stretch into a wide, satisfied smile. "All right, but let's not do it today, but tomorrow," she suggested, surprised at her own boldness. Fresh food of good quality is better to take at the market, and now, alas, it is already closed. Rob instantly realized what she was getting at. "Okay, tomorrow morning you give me a list of things to buy, and in the evening I'll come to your place for dinner." "Can I go to the market with you?" Mildred asked. "Well, to choose exactly what I need. Men don't usually know much about it." "With pleasure," nodded Rob. "It's more fun together. Especially, I sincerely enjoy your company." So they decided. After a little more chatting with her new acquaintance, Mildred went home. Rob kindly escorted her, promising to pick her up tomorrow at 8 a.m. From the excitement, Mildred completely forgot that she had wanted something to eat. She never made it to the store, went to bed with an empty stomach, and couldn't sleep for a long time, tossing from side to side. Naturally, she thought of her new acquaintance. And how could she not? A handsome man, and a gallant gentleman, and his voice, it's crazy. One could easily fall in love with that voice alone. What love, thought Mildred. I'm married. At the recollection of Justin, a flush of shame came to her cheeks. What a shame. I haven't had an opportunity to leave him, and I'm already looking at other men. Mildred, stop it, said her inner voice snidely. And what about Justin? Is he an angel incarnate? Actually, he cheats on me left and right, and I just decided to have dinner with a new acquaintance. There's no crime in that. Except that Mildred realized that Bob was dangerous to her. Dangerous in the sense that he was the first person in the last 20 years that she liked as a man. Before that, only her husband had existed for Mildred. I wonder what I should wear to the market tomorrow, so Rob doesn't think I'm dressed up especially for him, but while he likes it. Mildred was as nervous as a high school girl on a first date, but the excitement was pleasant. Finally, she fell into a sound, healthy sleep. Mildred remembered the next day as one of the best days of her life. Everything had turned out exactly as she'd hoped. In the morning, Rob came to pick her up and paid her a sincere compliment on her appearance. Then they went to the market, where they spent almost 2 hours wandering between fish, dairy, vegetable and fruit rows. Mildred decided to cook fish on coals. The apartment building had its own barbecue area and a good barbecue grill. The main secret, tender, melting-in-the-mouth juicy fish, was in the marinade. At first, Rob still tried to participate in the process, watching with what knowledge she was choosing products, pricing and bargaining, but then just waved his hand and gave up, completely trusting Mildred. His mission was only to count out the money and carry the purses for her. Mildred offered to split the expenses in half. She, fortunately, was not tight on funds, but he even took offence at such a suggestion and categorically declared that he would pay for everything himself. "Listen, where did you learn to bargain so masterly?" marvelled Rob after the black-eyed, mustachioed salesman ran out from behind the counter 3 times, grabbed Mildred's sleeve, begged her to come back, kissed her hands and finally halved the price of the freshest fish. Mildred shrugged and smiled coquettishly. "Nowhere. I guess it's my innate talent." Finally, having loaded Rob with bags and packages, Mildred graciously acknowledged that this was the end of it. "Well then," she said as she said goodbye to Rob outside her house, "now please leave me until tonight. I will marinate the fish, make salads and dessert. All that will be left for you to do is help me with the barbecue." "I'm already drooling." Rob winked at her and smiled. "See you tonight, Mildred." For dinner, Rob Prince had a bottle of good local wine. The evening passed splendidly. They, amicably in 4 hands, fried fish on the grill and quickly set the table. "Mildred, you're just a magician," Rob said seriously, having finished everything on his plate and asking for more several times. The woman even blushed. "And you know what?" Rob said to her suddenly. "I want to propose to you." But I'm married." Mildred was frightened. "It's a bit too sudden." "Not a marriage proposal, but a business proposal." Rob laughed, and Mildred felt like a complete fool. However, Rob immediately gallantly added, "Although if you were free, I swear I would have made marriage proposal immediately. It's a sin to miss such a beautiful and talented woman." Mildred was embarrassed and reminded, "So what's the business proposition?" "You see, I have my own radio station." "What?" Mildred was surprised. "I own a radio company. I started out as a regular announcer and gradually moved up the ranks. I still do some broadcasts now and then, just for old time's sake." "An announcer? Well, of course, an announcer. What else can you do with such an enchanting voice?" "Well," Rob continued, "I've had a cooking program in mind for a long time, but the project stalled because I can't find a suitable host." "Why, I thought many people wanted to work in radio." "Plenty of people want to work in radio, but not all of them can. Some have a nasty voice, some have a lisp, some mumble and stutter. Anyway, we even held a casting call a month ago, but we couldn't find anyone." "Really? How many people auditioned?" "At least 100. You see," Rob looked at her seriously, "we need not just a presenter who reads out loud recipes, but a person who really knows how to cook. But professional chefs are often very slurred. They cook perfectly but can't connect 2 words, and it's even more interesting and appetizing to talk about the prepared dish so that all the listeners drool. We were even thinking of inviting professional food bloggers who make videos, but they just lose all their luster on the radio because we have no picture, only sound." "What a pity." Mildred shook her head sympathetically, still not understanding what this had to do with her. "But now you were sent to me," Rob said, looking her in the eye. "I would like to try you for the role of hostess of this program." "It's not my thing. I can't. I won't be able to." She planned to answer and was about to add, "My husband won't let me." but instead she opened her mouth and blurted out, "I agree." That very day, she dialed her husband's number to let him know she was coming back tomorrow. "Okay, Mildred, I'm waiting," Justin responded, however, in a slightly sour tone. He didn't have an opportunity to enjoy his party enough. Mildred grinned to herself and said goodbye. She was about to drop the call, but suddenly some muffled noise was heard in the receiver. Probably Justin had accidentally missed the button, wanted to interrupt the phone call, but instead, without knowing it, he was still in touch. Mildred thought she heard a woman laughing. She became alert and listened. "Who is it? Did your wifey call?" came a muffled but still distinct whimsical voice from somewhere in the distance. "And who else?" Justin replied gloomily. "Our vacation is over." Mildred gasped with indignation. "She's a nerd, after all," said the invisible woman with annoyance. Mildred heard every word clearly. Another one woman would have spent at least half a month at sea, and this one's back in less than a week. "You're right," agreed Justin easily. "She's buried herself in household chores, cooking, cleaning, and has long since ceased to be like a woman. She has no higher education, no hobbies, no interests outside the house, not even a woman's attractiveness left. She's gotten fat like a pig." Mildred couldn't believe her ears. Well, the fact that her husband has a mistress, she has already somehow endured. But the fact that he so humiliates Mildred, insults her in front of another woman, it's despicable, low and petty. "Good thing you're not at all like that, my beauty," he added admiringly. Mildred heard the sounds of kissing and she almost vomited. She hurriedly stroked her finger across the screen to drop the call herself, and for a while longer she couldn't calm down, breathing heavily and trying to hold back tears of humiliation and shame. No, that scoundrel doesn't deserve a single tear from me. I won't cry for him. He's not worth it. Mildred resolutely grabbed her cell phone and redialed her husband's number. This time he responded with obvious displeasure, apparently annoyed that she was interfering with his fun, with his beauty. "What else?" he added impatiently. "I've got to run." Mildred took a deep breath and calmly said into the phone, "Justin, I want to divorce you." The cooking show that Mildred started to host on the radio was a great success within a few weeks. She was listened to by people of all ages, and many wrote thank you letters to the radio company's website for teaching them to cook uncomplicated, varied and delicious dishes. A few months later, she legally married the owner of the radio company, Rob Bystritsky. She was happier than ever because he loved her as she was.